Princess Anne arrived at the door unannounced. No aide called ahead. No formal request through palace channels. No polite scheduling of a meeting at a mutually convenient time. She simply appeared, alone, at Laura Lopes's front door. And when Laura opened it and found Princess Anne standing there with a completely unreadable expression, the kind of calm that people who actually know Anne describe as far more frightening than anger, she stepped straight past her into the house without waiting to be invited. She stood in the middle of that living room. She told Laura she knew exactly what she had done. She knew about the sapphire. She knew it had been missing for over a year. She knew Laura had worn it, had smiled in photographs wearing it, had said nothing to a single soul while doing it. And then she said one word: return. Not please return it. Not we need to discuss this. Not I am deeply concerned about what appears to have happened. One word: return, delivered in the tone people who know Anne describe as the most devastating sound in the British royal world. Because it means the decision has already been made and nothing you say next will change a single thing about what happens to you. Within hours, the sapphire was back, placed in a plain box, left at a private entrance with a member of household staff, untraceable, unacknowledged, as though it had never left at all. But the story of how Princess Anne ended up standing in that living room, the decades of history that made that sapphire the single most important piece in the entire royal collection, is the story that deserves to be told in full. Welcome to the Marquee Report. Let's get into every detail. To understand why Anne reacted the way she did when she found that empty case, you need to understand something that happened decades earlier, something she carried for her entire life. When Anne was young, there was a moment during a formal occasion where her mother allowed Charles to wear a small family piece for the cameras. A moment built entirely around him. Anne stood right beside her brother and watched every single eye in the room turn toward Charles. Her mother's eyes went with them. Nobody looked at Anne at all. The second they were alone afterward, Anne shoved Charles hard in the chest, and he stumbled backward. She screamed at him that he kept getting everything and that nobody cared about her. Charles scrambled back up and screamed right back that she was only seeing what she wanted to see. Neither of them spoke for the rest of that day. Anne carried that wound for decades. That specific raw feeling of standing in plain sight and being completely unseen. She has spoken in interviews over the years about feeling sidelined and lonely growing up. Always present, always working, always showing up, and somehow always invisible. That context is essential, because it means the sapphire was never just jewelry to Anne. It was something else entirely, something that could only be understood by knowing what happened in a quiet room near the end of Elizabeth's life. In the final year of Queen Elizabeth's life, Elizabeth sat alone with Anne in a private room. No aides, no cameras, nobody else present. Elizabeth's hands were thin by then, the skin loose over her knuckles, but her grip was still firm when she reached for Anne's hand and held it. Anne looked at her mother's face that day and saw something she had rarely seen growing up. She saw her mother actually looking at her the way a mother looks at a daughter. Elizabeth showed Anne a sapphire, and she told her that this exact piece would be hers one day. She told Anne that she had watched her stand quietly in her brother's shadow for her entire life and never once complain, never once asked for recognition, never once demanded to be noticed. She said Anne had earned this because of every single year she had shown up without being asked to. Anne lifted her mother's hand to her lips and kissed it. Neither of them said anything else for a long time. They simply sat there holding each other. Two women who had spent decades being formal and disciplined in public, finally allowing themselves one private moment of tenderness behind closed doors. That sapphire was not a piece of jewelry. It was the only time her mother had ever made up for that childhood wound, the one piece that said, "I see you," after a lifetime of feeling invisible. So when Anne went looking for it recently, wanting to wear it to a small private memorial at Sandringham on her mother's birthday, with only close family present and no cameras anywhere near it, and found nothing but empty space where it should have been. Her grief turned into fury in seconds. Anne knows her mother's jewelry collection the way a soldier knows every part of their weapon. She helped catalog it herself. She knows exactly where every piece belongs and exactly why it matters. The second her fingers found nothing where that sapphire should have been, she made one call. A former member of her mother's household staff, someone who had personally helped catalog parts of that collection years earlier, someone she trusted completely. One question: had that sapphire ever been formally signed out or loaned to anyone? The silence that followed told her everything before a single word came back. No record existed anywhere. Someone had taken it, quietly enough that no paperwork existed to trace the movement. Anne began working through the official inheritance trail, checking which pieces from Elizabeth's collection had been properly passed down after her death. Some had. Several of Elizabeth's most cherished pieces went to Charles and to Camilla. A few other family members had also been seen wearing pieces from the collection in the months that followed. None of that was secret. None of that was the problem. The problem was that the George VI sapphire set, the stones Elizabeth's father had given her as a wedding gift, had no proper documentation. These pieces had been quietly cycling through restoration and cleaning work for years, and that work had gone to one person consistently: Laura Lopes, Camilla's daughter. Her name was on every record connected to that kind of work. She had spent hours alone with stones nobody else in the family ever got close to, completely unsupervised, completely unwatched, because she had the right training and the right last name to make people stop asking questions. Here is where the trail became specific enough to remove all doubt. By the time word had spread in certain circles that Anne was looking for a missing piece, word came back about a photograph. Never published, taken during a quiet afternoon at Highgrove. In it, Laura Lopes was wearing a sapphire piece nobody in the room had recognized at the time. Nobody thought twice about it when it was taken. But once Anne described the missing sapphire in detail, down to the setting and the shape of the stones, the same source remembered the photograph immediately. The description matched exactly. Anne sat with that information for a long moment, working out the timeline. When she lined up everything she now knew, she realized the sapphire had likely been gone for over a year. A whole year of Laura wearing her mother's sapphire as though it was a trinket she had picked up at a market. Her hands curled into fists. She slammed her fist down on the table, hard enough that the phone beside it jumped. But Anne's mind was not on Laura alone at that point. It had moved straight to Camilla. Here is the context that made one missing sapphire feel like the final piece of a much larger picture. The moment Queen Elizabeth died, the machinery of royal inheritance began moving almost immediately, and Camilla did not wait politely on the sidelines. Since the funeral, Camilla has been the only royal seen wearing the Belgian sapphire tiara, a piece Elizabeth had bought herself, one of the very few items in the entire collection she had chosen and paid for with her own money. She wore it at the South African state banquet within months of the funeral. Then again, at the diplomatic reception that December. Within a year, Camilla had quietly positioned herself as the keeper of Elizabeth's entire sapphire legacy. That tiara carries history. Most people wearing it never pause to consider. The sapphires once belonged to Princess Louise of Belgium, a woman whose husband had her thrown into an asylum when she fell in love with someone else. Her lover was imprisoned. Her father sold every jewel she owned to cover her debts while she sat locked away with no say in any of it. Elizabeth took those stones and turned them into something dignified, something earned, something that stood for 70 years of duty instead of 70 years of disgrace. Camilla wore that history like a costume for an entrance, for attention, for a photograph. Anne had heard that Camilla once said people with necks like Anne's had no real say over who wore what jewelry. Anne let that comment pass. She said only that Camilla was not worth her energy, but she remembered it. She always remembered things like that. When Anne lined it all up, the tiara taken within weeks of the funeral, the necklace chosen to match it, the bitterness toward Catherine over pieces Elizabeth had explicitly directed elsewhere, and now a missing sapphire sitting on Laura's wrist for over a year. It stopped looking like separate incidents. It looked like one woman building an empire out of stones that were never hers to take. Anne did not request a meeting through any formal channel. She simply appeared at Laura's door. Laura opened it and found Princess Anne standing alone, completely calm, the kind of calm that terrifies people who know what sits underneath it. Anne walked past her into the house without waiting. She stood in the middle of the room and laid out everything she knew: the sapphire, the year it had been missing, the photograph, the restoration records, all of it. Laura tried to speak. Anne did not let her finish a single sentence. She told Laura plainly what was at stake. Eliza standing as a bridesmaid at William and Catherine's wedding. Gus and Louis standing on the Buckingham Palace balcony as pages of honor during the coronation. None of that belonged to Laura as a right. It existed because the family had chosen so far to extend that warmth to her children, and every single bit of it could be taken back just as quietly as it had been given. Laura's face drained of color. She asked for a moment alone. There was no moment alone. Anne stood there and waited, saying nothing, letting the silence do the cutting that words could not. Nobody inside that family can ever say out loud what Anne was communicating in that silence. Elizabeth's will is sealed for 99 years. Nobody outside the family will ever know exactly which piece was meant for whom. That secrecy cuts both ways. It lets pieces drift into the wrong hands without anyone outside noticing. But it also means taking them back can never be done publicly, because dragging this into the open would tear straight through the king's own wife. Anne could not release a statement. She could not call a press conference. So she did the only thing available. She walked in herself. She made it personal. She made it clear. Before she left, she said one more thing. She told Laura that her mother and the late Queen had spoken once about the difference between fashion and style. Fashion fades. Style outlives the person wearing it. Those sapphires were never about fashion. They carried the weight of a reign that lasted 70 years. They were irreplaceable, and whatever Laura believed she had a right to was never hers to decide. Here is what happened after Anne walked out. Within hours, the sapphire was back. A plain box left at a private entrance with a member of household staff, untraceable. No confirmation of receipt. No acknowledgement it had ever been gone. Days later, it was simply back in its case, sitting exactly where it should have been the entire time. Sources close to Laura say she told a friend afterward that she had never been spoken to that way by anyone in her entire life, royal or otherwise. She said Anne's voice never once rose, never once cracked, and that the calm was the most frightening part because it meant nothing about it had been impulsive. Anne had decided everything before she ever stepped through that door. The sapphire is back where it belongs. The relationship between Anne and Camilla's side of the family never recovered from that hour. No apology was exchanged, no reconciliation, just a permanent, unspoken silence that settled between two branches of the same family and has not lifted since. Anne stayed by her mother's side through the final 24 hours of Elizabeth's life. She called it an honor and a privilege to walk her through that last journey. She was the last person to hold that hand before it went still. The hollow case she found when she went looking for the sapphire felt like a direct insult to every hour of those final 24, and to the promise made in a quiet room long before them. The case is full again. The sapphires belong to the crown. They belong to history, and as long as Anne is still standing, that is exactly where they are going to stay. This has been the Marquee Report. Subscribe and hit the bell so you never miss what comes next. See you on the next one.